Hi, I'm Shane Croak, and in this tutorial I'm going to show you my technique for sketching Reptar from the Nickelodeon series Rugrats. A quick technique overview. So I have a very loose, quick technique. The key is to don't think, just draw. Don't overthink it. Plan where you're going to put your line. Just go put it down. Mistakes are welcome. They're fine. They're going to happen. It's part of art. This is supposed to be fun. So what I want you to do is have fun, be free, do you. If you've been here for a while, you might recognize this image. I drew Reptar once before on a 2.5 by 3.5 inch playing card with alcohol markers. That short has almost 4 million views. I thought for my first long form video, it would be fun to recreate that drawing, but using watercolor technique that I've been using more recently and do it on a larger canvas. So let's do it. Okay, to start off here, what we're going to do is just kind of visualize this drawing and where we want to place it on the paper. So I'm kind of lining up the middle here and lining up the end of the nose. I'm going to put a little dot right here where I want the nose to be for Reptar. And then I'm just thinking about the angle of this nose and what I want it to look like. So I'll come around and up and then back down and across, and that's about how big I want that head to be. And in my mind, I'm just thinking about Reptar on the paper. So I'm going to put a dot here. This is the other side of the mouth. We're going to start here and just go from kind of dot to dot. That's pretty good. And then we're going to put the eye. And what we're really trying to do in the beginning here is set up some visual aids for us. So we've got the lip and the eye. And what we're going to do from this point is try to line up everything else that we're going to do based on kind of where this lip and where this eye is. And so we're just continuing to add different reference points within the drawing. So we've got the eye, we've got this really cool dinosaur thin pupil. Okay, we're going to do the nose next, and I'm going to start on this angle here. And again, we're trying to line that up with the eye. So we want the nose to go a little bit higher than the eye. We're going to put this kind of outside nostril there. It's probably a little bit bigger than I wanted it to be. That's okay. We'll do the inside nostril here. Put the little hole. Okay, now let's look at these spikes on the top. What we want to make sure that we're doing with these is again, we're trying to line it up with the eye here. So let's start with this first spike. Yep, that looks pretty good. And then the next one is going to be a little bigger than that. And we want this third one to land, just shy of the eye if you're looking vertically straight down, just before the beginning of the eye. Yep, that's about right. A little detail under it here. Okay, now we've got kind of have the top of the head here that we want to put in. And then we also have the kind of eyebrow on the other side that we need to put in. But I think we'll do this spike first because it's in front of that eyebrow. So we're going to, again, line it up with this eye. We got part of the eyebrow here, and the spike is going to be about here and up and around. Yep, and then this one's kind of straight up from the eye. And then the eyebrow on this side kind of has another little bump in here we're going to add. So we're going to add that. And then add this third spike here. I'm calling these spikes, but they're pretty rounded. Okay, now we can go ahead, fill that in, and then, yeah, I like how that looks. Let's go ahead and add in this eyebrow on the other side of the head. All right, then we got another spike here we're going to add in. And again, we're looking at the eye and using that as a guide for where we're going to put these spikes. So you can see this third spike is landing pretty close to the middle of the eye vertically. And the back of the head there, and now we're gonna do the bottom of the mouth before we add in the teeth or the tongue. So just trying to measure that out from kind of, okay, here's the middle, here's about where I want the corner of that mouth to be. I'm gonna put a dot there. And then draw an arrow from the top down to here, a little bit of a curve to it. And then where do I want the edge of that lip to land? About here below that nostril. And let's connect to the dots. Okay, I think I like that. Now we want to think about what is in front. So the teeth are in the front, so we want to draw these bottom teeth before we draw that tongue. We put 4 teeth in here. We don't have to be too crazy about getting the exact right shape. I kind of like to make it sketchy, so kind of go back and forth on these teeth. Yeah, that's about right. Okay, now I'm thinking about this tongue. We got this middle line on the tongue is kind of in between the second and third tooth and lands right about in the middle of the mouth. So we've got that curve there, and then let's see where the front of this tongue is going to land. It comes up from about here on the mouth, and it's going to go out a little bit past the lip and curve it back around, and it should land down in between those 2 teeth on the very end. Yep. Now let's add this top part of the tongue somewhere about here, and it's going to land right there. Okay, I like that. Now let's do the teeth on the top. And again, we're not super concerned about perfect lines here. We're just trying to get these teeth down. And then these last 2 are going to be quite a bit smaller because they're almost on the front of Reptar. So I probably didn't leave enough room for this front one, but it's not exactly how I wanted it to be. That's okay. Okay, now let's close this off. And we'll darken the inside of the mouth here. I'm just going to draw some diagonal lines in this direction, and I don't want to fill everything with black. I want to leave a little bit of white space in there, but diagonal lines in one direction, and then we'll go back in the opposite direction, diagonal lines, and make it a little bit darker. But again, we want to leave some of that white space in there. We don't want it to be a full black blob. finish this bottom lip here. Chin, maybe. A chin or a lip. Do dinos have lips? I don't know. Okay, now I'm starting to get something that looks like Reptar. Put a couple details here on the top. All right, let's try to mark in some of these lips. I'm just trying to get some of the details from the top here in before I continue moving on and do the back of his head. Maybe a little more kind of shading here, rough this line up. Some of those teeth lines went a little bit into the lip. I don't love how they run over, so a little bit of kind of distress on the lip there. Okay, I think that's pretty good. Let's move on. We'll add part of the neck here. And again, we're trying to line this up, and it's going to be kind of a little wavy on the bottom. We're just trying to think about where we want this to land. So we're going to put the dot and just some wavy lines here on the bottom. These don't have to be perfect. Just a couple waves, but you want to end it going up. And then let's draw the back of the head here. Again, nothing too perfect, just pulling lines down. Pen is drying out a little bit, as you can see, but that's all right. And we've got one more spike that's kind of here, about lined up with the middle of the mouth. So let's add it. I'll extend that line through a little bit. Okay, now we want to add this post that the Reptar head or mask is on. I don't know what I wanted this to be. I think a mask. Funny story about this card. My intention was to draw all of Reptar when I was making this card, and I misjudged the size so terribly that I didn't have room for the rest of it. So I didn't feel like erasing, and because I was using a pencil at the time, and so I just did the head, and I thought, well, I can't just have a floating head. I thought back to one of those Rugrats episodes where I think Reptar was dressed up, as like a mascot, and he came to a kid's party. And I feel like I could be wrong, but I feel like the kids saw the guy with the Reptar head off, like he was hot. I know those suits are hot, and they were all terrified. So I don't know if that was an actual episode or if I just imagined that in my head, but that's the story I told myself about what this was. So we got the inside of the mask done there with a little bit of shading. We're going to do a little bit more shading here on the lip and the neck before we go down and finish this base. Just looking for places that I might want to put a little bit of shadow or a little bit of detail. I'm going to add a little bit more shading on the back here with ink than I did on the original plain card. Get a little more room to work with here on this larger piece of paper, so I'm going to add a little bit more ink on the back here. And we'll add some shadowing here too on each one of these spikes, just to give them a little bit more depth. Okay, now let's line up this circle. We want to make sure we don't go too far down on the paper because we want to leave room for the side of this base. So we're going to make this a nice oval here that comes pretty close to that stand. About like that. Okay, I like that. And then let's put in the side here. So we'll just do some straight lines from the edges and wrap that around. And then kind of shade it in here with some same kind of hatching technique that we used above with just some diagonal lines. This direction and then the other direction. Let's close off this stand here. We'll put a few little details on the edge here to make this pop a little bit. A little bit of pop. And a little bit of shading here on the side. Think I'm liking how this looks. Just looking for anywhere else I might want to add some details. Maybe around this lip, darken that in a little bit. Any last details I want to add before we do the border? I think I'll flip the pin over. That's the cool thing about these pins with the bent nib. You can flip it over and get a really narrow line for some of these small spots that I want to add some shading to. And we're just going to hit the edges of these spikes just to give it a little bit of a shadow, a little bit of depth. Okay, we got a pretty good line drawing here. We got some details, we've got a little bit of depth, we've got some shading. I think now we can throw a border on this. The border isn't an exact science either, much like most of the drawing, so we're just going to kind of bring it down, and you almost want the border to run into part of the drawing. I like how it adds a little bit more energy to the piece. And the border kind of ends right around the subject, so leave some gaps there. Intentionally make your border narrow so that it runs into your subject. Doesn't have to do it on all four sides. Like on the top here, the top of my Reptar doesn't quite go to the top of that border. But we're going to get it on the other three sides, so that looks pretty good. Stop it about there, and then right under the lip, and bring that all the way down. Cool. I think that's looking pretty good. Touch up a little bit of this, make it a little bit darker, and we're ready for watercolor. All right, now for the fun part, watercolor. I like to keep a little scratch piece of paper here to just see what these colors are really going to look like. Let's see if this green is going to work. This is the sap green. I think that's probably going to work for us. Let's try with a little bit less water and see if we can get it a little darker. Yeah, I think this is actually going to work. I thought we were going to have to mix some colors, but I think that is going to be fine. Okay, yep, we're just going to go with that green. So this is a Winsor & Newton watercolor paint set. It's got 16 colors. Do I use all 16? Probably not, but it's still a pretty handy size to have. It's nice to mix. I have a smaller one too, but I like using this one. Probably won't need all of them for this one. They're limited colors, but let's start off with this green. So we're going to get the brush pretty wet, and first thing we're going to do on all the colors is just put a base down. And one thing you're going to notice is we're not staying in the lines. This is the fun part, right? On the outsides, just really let that brush go. On the insides, we want to be detailed Don't want the green to run into the eye or the spikes because those are going to be a different color. So we're going to be a little more careful on the inside. But on the outside, we're going to have some fun. And again, don't worry too much about shading. Right now, we're going to just put down this kind of base layer of green, and then we're going to let it dry, and then we'll come back and add some of the details and some of the shading. So again, on the sides, we're going to go a little crazy, have some fun, don't stay in the lines. And we're going to continue to keep a pretty wet brush here. I don't want this to be too dark. Again, this is kind of our just base layer, so fill that in, have a little fun. I'm going to spread some of these darker spots around. Yep. There we go. All right, then I'm going to come in with the smaller brush and kind of go outside the lines a little bit more and give this a little bit more of a kind of a fine tooth burst here, if you will. It's looking pretty good. Now we're going to go in and let that green dry before we do any shading on it. We're going to come in with the blue with some of those spikes. I think we're just going to roll with this blue too. That looks pretty good. Close enough. And again, we are going outside the lines on the outside of the piece. Try to stay within them a little bit on the inside, but throw some spikes up there. I'm just starting out with the small brush on these spikes because they are a little smaller. And I really want those fine teeth on the explosion outside the lines here. So keep hitting those. Let's get this third or fourth one here. All right, now we need to make pink for the tongue, so this one's not going to be as easy. We don't have a pink, so we're going to do this red here, and we're going to put a lot of red down here in this pan, a little bit more. Got a pretty big tongue to do. Some of that red out of the brush, and then we're just going to add a little bit of white to this. Just grab a little bit of that, mix it in, and see if that gives us the pink we're looking for. Yeah, I think that's pretty good. I think that's where we want to be. Mix that up a little bit more. Oh yeah, that's gonna work. I'm gonna just do the inside of the tongue here, and then I think I'll come back with that small brush and hit the outside and get those kind of fine teeth on the explosion there. Grab the small brush, let's get some paint in that, and let's have some fun. There we go. Okay, I like that. Now, grab this big brush again. And I'm going to grab some of this gray, but I really want it to be really light. So I hit just a little bit of it and then wipe some of it off here on my scratch piece of paper and then hit this base. Yeah, that's about right. And again, we're not worried about shading on any of this yet. We're just putting down base color and we're giving each color a little bit of time to dry. And we're going to come back in with another layer of the same color to do all the shadows. We'll fill in these shadows a little bit with some of that gray. I said I wanted to keep some white in there, and you can still see that white coming through, but I just want it to be a little bit darker. But leaving some of that white gives a little bit more texture than if it was just solid black. All right, now let's get this eye. And I think this orange is going to be good. Test it a little bit. Yeah, I think that's good. Orange eye. That's a little more wet than I want it to be. Probably should have come in a little bit drier here, but that's okay. We'll put a thicker coat on next time around. Okay. Here are base colors. It looks pretty flat right now. That's okay. We are going to come in with this green and start adding in some of the shading and really give this thing some depth. So you want to keep your brush a little bit drier here and just hit some of these spots that are going to be kind of in shadow. So a little bit here on the upper lip, around the eye, maybe this side of the nostril, maybe this eyebrow that's on the other side. And on the back here, we want to put a pretty heavy shadow, so we'll really wrap that around. We're going to leave a pretty hard line here between the shadow and the base color. You can blend this in if you really want to, using a wet brush and make it look a little more realistic, but I like to have the hard line between the shadow and the base, but personal preference. So we'll continue to just hit some of these lines, some of these spots where I think there might be a shadow. Maybe this bottom lip could use a little bit. A little more green here. We'll hit kind of the bottom edge. Let's come in with a little brush and just get some really fine details. Just a few lines here to break this up a little bit and bring some of that shadow out without bringing the full shadow out. Just a few hints of the shadow. Maybe hit this bottom lip a little bit more. You can already see this is really starting to add some nice depth with these shadows coming in. So we're going to do the same thing on all the base layer colors we put down. So we did green. Now let's come back in with this blue. This blue should be dry now. And we're just going to hit the edges here to bring out some of the dimension in these. So just kind of the back of each one of these spikes. Not too much to do on this blue. You really want to make sure you don't overdo it. just hit some of these spots where it didn't get quite as dark. Some of the paint is running over. That was a little bit green there. Some of that was some more blue. Paints are probably a little bit wet and mixed together there. All right, let's grab some of this gray again and get the bottom. That is way darker than I wanted it to be. All right, let's see if we can soak some of that up with a dry brush. Kind of. Let's try the bigger brush. This is a much better quality brush too, this bigger one. You can see that it really, if you get it dry, it can really soak up some of the extra paint that you put down. And then we'll go back in with the small one and try to even it out. That looks fine. Again, a little bit more than I wanted to, but that's okay. That's the fun thing about this style, this technique. It's not supposed to be perfect. All right, let's go back in with the small brush and we'll grab some more of this red, kind of mix it in here. This previous pink that we made, and I'm not even going to add any white. We want this to be darker anyways. There's already a little bit of white left in the pan, so I think this is going to be pink enough for us, and we want it to be a shadow anyways, so I think I'm going to like how this looks. Tongues are always weird to try to draw and shadow the way that they bend and turn. And this one probably isn't as perfect as I would like it to be, but I don't hate it. It's large and in charge. So let's throw some a little more shadow in here. Maybe a little bit more on the top part of the tongue. All right, it's looking pretty good. Now let's do some splatters. We want to get the brush really wet, get some of that pink, and really I'm using the small brush initially. And we're just going to hold the brush over the area that's colored and tap it, and then we can go in and really kind of flip it too. You're holding the brush, grab it with your finger, and flip it. We've already got the teeth coming out of there, and what this is going to do is just add a little bit more movement, a little bit more texture. On the green, I'm really going to go kind of all over the place. And then on the edges, flip the brush. You want to get plenty of paint on the brush. Keep it wet. Make sure that it's really spraying out of there. Again, this isn't a perfect science. This is a kind of a feel and how messy you want to get with it. So do some blue too on each one of these spikes and then flip it. So you're starting to see kind of what this does. Again, we've got the teeth in there with the small brush, but bringing in those sprays is really nice. So we definitely need to go back in and hit this eye. You can see the green ran into it. I think it's dry enough now. We can go in with some more orange. That should cover that up pretty good. Yeah, that looks good. A little dark at the bottom, but I think I like how it's coming out. Now let's get a bunch of orange. on the brush, and we'll hit a little bit of orange right here around the eye. This will be a little bit more wet. Really don't want to do too much here on the orange, so I'm trying to be really careful, but I need a little bit more than that. There we go. Okay, now this step really cleans it up. I didn't always do this, um, but we're going to do a white outline around that border, and this really makes everything look clean. I mean, it is messy, but this kind of organizes the messy a little bit. So I like to start off with one of these gel pens, and we'll go around and just get really close. This doesn't have to be perfect. I mean, you don't want to go over your black lines, your outlines too much. But after this dries, we're going to come back with the black pen and hit those outside lines again. So this doesn't have to be perfect. And we're also going to make this a little bit wider at the end with a Posca marker. I just like to come in with the pen first and get really close. And then we're going to switch over to the Posca marker here and make that line a little wider, a little more defined. So same thing, just going around the outside. Trying not to draw over our outside line, but if we do, that's okay. We're going to come back with the pen and we can fix it. So I love how this looks. It really brings a little bit of organization to this style. It's a messy style anyways, but I like how the white outline looks. Okay, then we're going to add in a few highlights. So I'm going to use the marker for a couple spots, but you got to be careful with the marker because it's so big. I really like to use the gel pen more because you can get a more fine line. And we don't want to overdo it with the highlights. We just want to add a few spots in here. Give it a little bit of a shine, a little bit more depth. So we'll just kind of put some dots on the spikes here. And on the eye. Just any other kind of high spots you can hit. Again, you don't want to overdo it with this. And then we're going to go in with the black fine liner and hit this outline. So not much instruction needed here. We're just going to kind of go around. Make sure your white outline is dry first. You have to give it a few minutes, and then we're going to go in with this fine liner. These are Copics, but you can use other fine liners too. This is a 0.5 size. And again, we're just going to kind of clean up this a little bit. Anywhere where that marker might have went over, just hit it. And we're going to go over some of the spots on the drawing itself too. Some of the watercolor drowns out the black in some areas, and I like to go back over that and really darken some of those spots. So we use the fine liners to do that. Add a little bit of shadows here. And here we're just going to go over these spots that I think got a little bit faded, I guess I would call it, from the watercolor. So we're just going to go back in and darken those out. And this is really just a feel. Yours might look a little bit different. It might have gotten lighter in different places. So I use two size pens. This is the 0.3, so this is a finer line. So we can go in and clean up any of these spots with this 0.3. I pretty much just use the 0.3 and the 0.5 when it comes to these details at the end. And again, this is just kind of feel based on what your piece looks like and how your watercolor affected your ink. I think this looks pretty good. Let's touch up this spot right here a little bit. We hit these little shadows we threw in. And last thing to do, put your name on this thing. So you can sign your name anywhere that it fits. This one fits pretty nice right here at the bottom. Sign your name, take one last glimpse, throw the cap on, and that's it. That's my technique to Sketch Reptar. It's loose, it's fun, it's unique. If you need any of the art supplies that I used, I've got my Amazon affiliate links below. So go and scoop some of those up. I do get a little kickback from that. Thank you very much. And that's all I got. Go draw something.